Fouls have been a little bit of an issue, a thorn in your side, if you will, over the course of the season. I know you didn't get a lot of practice time between now and Friday, but is there maybe mental work that y'all are doing to kind of temper some of those?
Yeah, I think that was really the reason that Toronto game got away from us. I think it was kind of a ridiculous stretch in that second where it was just back to back to back possessions, which were really unnecessary. I think I'm a lot more risk adverse. I'm less conservative when it comes to points on the table. Like, if it's a play at the rim, or a play aggressively going for a swipe inside the paint, those are the ones I'm always happy with. But it definitely wasn't any of those ones. It was really a lot of like full court ones. I think we've just got to be more intentional with our individual defensive awareness in relation to positioning and kind of spatial distance, because I think a lot of times it was those transition ones where we were just like literally coming in the way and just getting called for blocking fouls, which they were. So I think I'm not a huge fan of the phrase defending without fouling, but we used it for the first time today. And it's, I think that's something just requiring some more work in terms of knowing where we want to be more aggressive, and then plays we can't afford to be sending teams to the line, especially when we're in the bonus.
Why are you not a fan of that phrase? Just because it's such a cliche, just because it's so common?
Yeah, you know what, Sean? I think OKC kind of inspired me a lot there, just in terms of seeing their defense, and it really so aggressive in terms of, I did a deep dive on them like 2 off seasons ago, and you see like the swipes and the gaps, and even when they're in the bonus, they're being really aggressive. And I think it's the idea that, and that's kind of how we started the season, right, where this idea of the turnover and forcing turnovers is more valuable than the foul. But I think it just requires a bit more practice time to then be really attuned to, all right, these situations, we got to be a little bit more conservative here. But if it's in a scoring area, that's where we're going to take the risk. And I think that's what they do really well.
The next time you guys practice is going to be at your own facility out in Hillsborough with the Thorns are going to be in the same building. As a franchise, they're in a very different place in their life than you guys are with, they're always like a favorite in NWSL, and they have established like mega stars on the team. I guess having a team like them in the building, how big is that for you guys as you continue to develop?
Yeah, it's great. I think just really having, obviously the last week, it was such an inspirational week with the Epicenter week. I think, we're really fortunate to have the ownership group we have. Just hearing, a bunch of stories that were shared at the gala, at the ribbon cutting ceremony, just, their belief in women's sports and their investment to really putting us in the best place to succeed. I feel like we're really fortunate to have that. And I think it's important because this off season is going to be important to us. I think we've really done a good job kind of establishing our identity and building a foundation. And to your point, I think, you see the Fawns, and that's where we'd love to aspire to get to in, 2-3 years. And I think that's why I think, investing in the practice facility, that's huge for us. It's really going to help with, free agency and things of that note when you have one of the best facilities in the league.
With this Washington team, kind of one of the surprises of the league this year, with how being in position for the playoffs, with how young they are, is that a kind of situation you look at and kind of say, hey, this is where we could be in a couple of years, with like how quickly they were able to build it up?
Yeah, definitely. I think too, they did a really good job building through the draft, and I think I don't think that I think it's less clear cut, especially for an expansion team. You saw it with Golden State in terms of, you make a few 1-2 additions in free agency, and if you have a good foundation, it can, lead to good dividends. So whereas, I think Washington did a really intentional job building through the draft, and now, got multiple all-star candidates. So I think it's, 2 different paths, but I think we've got the foundation here. When I look at all the young players in our group, I'm really excited about them. I think, games like the last Toronto game, it's always incredibly frustrating when you don't play to your potential, especially when we've been playing so well this last stretch of like 8 games. But I've got to remember, that we've got the second youngest team in the league to Washington, and multiple 22-year-olds on our roster, multiple rookies getting a lot of playing time. And I think it's, it's part of when you play a young team, you kind of go through. You have games where there's just like going to be mistakes. There's going to be up and down moments, and it's we just got to stay the course, stay positive, and make sure we're continuing to learn.
You mentioned defending without fouling or you said that phrase for the first time today. How important is that mindset going to be against the Mystics, who are one of the best teams in the league at getting to the free throw line?
Definitely. I think what we've got to be intentional with too is just they're a really good team in terms of scoring in the paint. So I think it's how can we really be intentional with our positions off the ball to try and protect the paint at all costs. I think kind of similarities to when we played the Seattle game and kind of what our game plan was in those two games there. So I think that's a good challenge for us, knowing, with their bigs getting a lot of shots in the paint. So how can we defend those where we're not just sending them to the line unnecessarily?